Do you think there is a nuclear threat? Do you think about this? Do you worry about this, that there is a threat of a tactical nuclear weapon being dropped?
I think that possibility exists either way, and I think the responsibility for that is on Russia. Because it just can't be the case that if you have nukes, you're allowed to invade countries and take their land. Because if anything, I think that down the road also increases the potential for nuclear problems in the future, right? Because at that point, either every single country has to acquire their own nuclear weapons, because if you don't, Russia's going to mess with you, or every single country has to join NATO. And now what? We're back at square zero, ground zero, square one, where people are like, oh, well, look, all these countries joining NATO is aggressive towards Russia. Like, what are you going to do?
Yeah, you've mentioned that there's a complicated calculus going on with the countries that have nuclear weapons.
Mm-hmm.
And what's our responsibility? Are you allowed to do anything you want to countries that don't have nuclear weapons? That's a really tricky discussion.
For sure.
Because what is U.S. supposed to do if Russia drops a tactical nuclear weapon? There's a set of options,
Mm-hmm.
none of which are good.
Mm-hmm.
And it's such a tricky moment right now because the things that Biden and other public figures say, I feel like has a significant impact on the way this game turns out. Because I think mutually assured destruction is partially a game of words.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I believe in the power of conversation, of leaders talking to each other. I feel like you have to have a balance between threat and compromise and like empathy for the needs, the geopolitical, the economic needs of a nation, but also sort of respect and represent your own interests.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a tricky one. Like, how do you play the hand?
It reminds me of I don't know if you've ever heard in like evolutionary psych or evolutionary biology, there are things called tit for tat strategies. It kind of reminds me of that, where it's like if like there are a whole bunch of these little biological mechanisms where creatures will develop, like socializing, like tit for tat. If you do something bad to me, I'm going to do something bad for you, and then more complicated schemes will come out where it'll be like tit for tat, where it's like you can make one mistake, and then I'm going to get you if you do a second one, or it could be tit for tat, or there could be tit for tat for tat. There's like all these like back and forths where creatures kind of optimize themselves, and yeah, I think something the United States did really well in terms of that kind of conversational strategy, and I approved of this in the beginning, was Biden was very clear about setting out like the exact level of U.S. involvement for the war. We're not going to do a no-fly zone. There's not going to be U.S. troops on the ground in Ukraine, but we are going to send a whole bunch of money and a whole bunch of arms and a whole bunch of intel to them. And I thought he did a good job at laying out like the limitation of the U.S. involvement while opening as much as we could in the ways that we could help. But the that looming threat of some sort of tactical nuclear weapon, I think on the table right now is like it's going to be the annihilation of like Russian sea forces and everything, but you know, what happens if it continues to escalate? That's like a world that nobody wants to be in.